The storm tore through the valley, lightning igniting the sky as Elara stood upon the shattered cliffs with her cloak whipping in the wind. Her emerald eyes burned with anguish as she whispered, "It should never have been you." Across the ravaged ground, Kael reached for her with bloodied hands, his voice breaking as he said, "The curse won't keep me from you." The heavens split with a surge of raw magic, striking between them like a cruel reminder of fate. Their bond shimmered visibly, a chain of light binding them even as their bodies trembled under its weight. The world itself seemed to recoil, trees bending back and stones shattering under the force of their longing. In the shadows beyond the light, the villain watched with cold delight, whispering to the storm, "Let them suffer in love's cruel fire." Elara's tears glistened like diamonds against the chaos, as the eternal bond locked her heart between destiny and doom. The storm slowly subsided, leaving a silence that felt heavier than thunder. Elara stood frozen, her heart shackled by the chain of light that bound her soul to Kael. He whispered, "You can't run from this." She turned away, her trembling voice cutting through the stillness as she said, "It will destroy us both." The bond glimmered faintly, fading but not breaking. Around them the cliff bore scars of the magic's fury. Shattered stone, scorched earth, and the echo of an eternal curse. In the distance, the villain's presence lingered like a shadow, his cruel satisfaction hidden in silence. Elara lowered her eyes, torn between the weight of destiny and the ache of love she could not allow. Kael stepped closer, his boots crunching on broken stone. His storm-gray eyes were unwavering, filled with fierce devotion. "Elara, I'd rather burn than let go." She shivered, her hands clenching as she said, "You don't know the cost." The bond flickered faintly, like a fading flame, casting ghostly shadows across their faces. In the quiet aftermath, the storm clouds thinned, revealing a sky painted with fractured light. The moment stretched, fragile and aching, until the memory of the villain's laughter rippled across her mind. She pressed her lips together, fearing that fate's cruel design would consume them both. Yet, beneath her sorrow, a spark of longing refused to die. The wind whispered through the broken valley, carrying the scent of rain and ash. Elara lowered her hood, her pale face weary yet fierce. "This bond is a curse," she muttered. Kael's jaw tightened as he said, "Then let it curse me, not you." She turned sharply, emerald eyes blazing against the fading storm. The ground between them bore glowing cracks that pulsed faintly, as though the earth itself remembered their clash. Every heartbeat carried the weight of a destiny she had long fought to deny. And yet, in Kael's presence, that denial seemed fragile. The silence between them was heavier than thunder, stitched with longing neither dared name. Far beyond the cliffs, unseen eyes studied them. The villain's shadow lingered across the valley, his smirk sharp as a blade. "They will tear each other apart," he whispered into the silence. Elara closed her eyes, feeling the echo of his presence like a chill against her skin. Kael stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "Whatever this is, I'll fight it." She shook her head, whispering, "Love cannot fight fate." The chain of light pulsed faintly, fading into her chest. Above them the clouds parted, and a single star pierced through the darkness. It was a cruel reminder that hope always flickered brightest in despair. The storm's rage left behind a valley scarred by fire and silence. Elara walked among the ruins, her hands brushing over blackened stone as whispers of the curse gnawed at her heart. Kael followed at a careful distance, his storm-gray eyes fixed on her trembling figure. "You should not be here," she said, her voice barely carrying against the wind. He answered softly, "I belong where you are." The chain of light no longer glowed, yet its invisible weight bound them tighter than chains of iron. Shadows moved in the distance, reminders of a power that would not rest until they broke. Elara closed her eyes, fear etched across her face, but Kael's presence lingered like a shield she longed to trust, though destiny promised ruin. The air smelled of ash, but Kael stepped closer, ignoring the danger pressing in from the shadows. He reached for Elara, his bloodied palm trembling as he said, If this bond is a curse, let me carry it. She spun toward him, emerald eyes burning with sorrow. It is not yours to bear, she whispered. The space between them crackled faintly, as though the chain still lingered. Silence fell heavy, broken only by the whisper of leaves torn by wind. Elara's breath caught, her heart warring with her resolve, while Kael's devotion shone like a beacon against the ruin. In that fragile moment, the world seemed to pause, holding its breath as love and doom entwined. Nightfall draped the valley in silver, moonlight spilling across broken stone. Elara knelt beside the edge of a fractured stream, its waters reflecting fragments of the cursed bond's light. Kael stood near, his presence quiet but unyielding. You should not stay near me, she said, her voice trembling. He whispered, I will not leave you. The reflection in the water split into two, distorted by ripples that hinted at fates torn apart. Elara touched the surface, watching the water recoil in sparks of magic that stung her fingertips. She turned her face away, fearing the truth carved into the stars above them, yet unable to silence the longing that burned stronger with every breath. A faint rustle cut through the silence as the mentor appeared from the mist, his weathered staff tapping against stone. Arian studied them both. You cannot outrun destiny, he said, his voice low but firm. Elara lowered her gaze, whispering, the bond will destroy him. Arian's lips pressed into a thin line as he replied, or it may save you both, if you dare to trust it. Kael stepped forward, his voice steady. Then teach us what we must do. The old mentor's gaze softened, but his eyes carried sorrow, as though he already knew the price their love would demand. The wind howled across the cliffs as Arian raised his staff, the ground glowing faintly beneath etched symbols that pulsed with ancient magic. This bond is not mere curse, he said, his voice echoing through the night. Elara's heart pounded as she felt the chains stir within her, its unseen fire tugging at her soul. Kael braced himself, jaw set as he whispered, show me how to bear it. The markings blazed brighter, casting eerie shadows across their faces. Elara gasped, torn between fear and yearning, as destiny carved itself deeper into their hearts. Far beyond, unseen in the night, the villain watched with eyes burning like cold fire, waiting for their moment of weakness. The forest loomed like a cathedral of shadows, its branches twisting under the pale moonlight. Elara walked beside Kael, her emerald eyes sharp, wary of every rustle in the dark. This place is wrong, she whispered. Kael's hand tightened on the hilt of his blade, his storm-gray gaze scanning the trees. We are being watched. A faint laugh echoed, cold and mocking, sending a shiver down Elara's spine. The air thickened with magic, unnatural and suffocating. The bond stirred faintly, humming in her chest as if warning her. She pressed her lips together, refusing to show fear, yet inside her heart raced. From the shadows, unseen eyes tracked their every step with patient hunger. From the mist, a figure emerged, cloaked in shifting shadows. The shapeshifter appeared as a woman with flowing dark hair and piercing golden eyes, her beauty unsettling. Elara froze, whispering, "Who are you?" The figure smirked, voice soft and dangerous. "A friend or an enemy depending on how you see me." Kael raised his blade, his jaw tight. "Stay back." The bond flared between Elara and Kael, a shimmer of light betraying their fear. The shapeshifter's eyes lingered on the glow, amusement curving her lips. "Ah," she murmured. "So the curse is true." Elara felt her heart drop, knowing their secret was no longer theirs alone. The forest grew darker as the shapeshifter circled them, her footsteps silent on the moss. "Power like yours," she said, eyes gleaming, "always comes at a cost." Elara's breath caught as she whispered, "You know of the bond." The shapeshifter smiled, tilting her head. "I know more than you wish." Kael stepped closer to Elara, his stance protective. "Speak plain," he demanded. The figure laughed softly, shadows curling around her form as her features shifted for a heartbeat into another face, a man's, before settling back. Elara shivered, realizing trust was a dangerous gamble. Yet, the truth she carried weighed heavy, and perhaps this stranger held pieces they needed. Through the trees, a sudden surge of energy split the ground, casting sparks into the air. Elara gasped as the villain appeared, his silver hair catching the moonlight, his cold eyes fixed on her. Still clinging to hope, he said with mocking calm. Kael stepped forward, blade raised, growling, "You will not touch her." The villain's smile widened, his voice a whisper of poison. "She is already mine." Elara felt the chain within her burn, its fire pulling her toward him as though fate itself betrayed her. She staggered back, clutching her chest while Kael lunged. The night erupted into chaos, the forest trembling as power collided. The clash ended as suddenly as it began. The villain faded into shadows, his mocking laughter echoing through the trees. Elara collapsed to her knees, breath ragged as the bond seared inside her like fire. Kael dropped beside her, his hand gripping hers tightly. "Stay with me," he urged. She met his gaze, tears shimmering in her eyes. "He has part of me," she whispered. Kael's jaw clenched, fury darkening his features. "Then we will take it back." In the distance, the shapeshifter watched with unreadable eyes, her golden gaze reflecting both pity and amusement. Secrets deepened, and trust grew thinner, as destiny tightened its hold on them. The dawn broke over the valley, painting the battlefield ruins in crimson light. Elara stood at the cliff's edge, her emerald eyes reflecting both sorrow and fire. Kael moved beside her, his hand brushing his blade as if expecting danger. "The world turns against us," he said, voice low. Elara whispered, "It is not the world. It is fate itself." Her words lingered like a curse, echoing through the quiet air. The bond between them shimmered faintly, restless, burning inside her chest. Beyond the horizon, black smoke rose, heralding an army's march. Elara's breath quickened, torn between standing to fight and fleeing the pull of her doomed love. The ground quivered beneath their feet as the first thunder of hooves echoed from afar. Kael's hand tightened around his blade, his storm-gray eyes hardening. "They are coming," he said. Elara drew her cloak closer, her lips trembling with unspoken fear. "This curse calls blood to us," she whispered. The bond pulsed faintly, light searing against her skin. She felt the villain's shadow pressing closer, his will stretching across the land like poison. Kael turned toward her, fierce devotion in his gaze. "Then let them come. I will not leave you." The silence that followed felt fragile, as if the air itself feared to shatter the truth between them. From the broken path ahead, a figure emerged, once noble, now shrouded in darkness. Darius, the fallen hero, stepped into view. His dark hair fell in disarray over storm-hardened eyes, and his lips curved into a bitter smile. "Still bound by love's cruelty, Elara," he said. Her heart clenched, grief cutting deeper than the curse. "You should not be here," she whispered. Kael's hand moved instinctively to his blade, his jaw tightening. Darius laughed, hollow and sharp. "I was once where he stands. Now I am what fate made me." His presence thickened the air, heavy with regret and menace. The bond flared violently as Elara staggered, clutching her chest with a gasp. Darius' eyes gleamed with sorrow as he said, "This bond will devour you, as it devoured me." Kael stepped forward, blade raised, his voice a growl. "You betrayed her." Darius's bitter laugh echoed through the air. "I was betrayed first." The forest shuddered as magic rippled from his words, twisting branches and splitting stone. Elara's tears burned hot, her voice breaking as she whispered, "You were once my heart." The silence that followed trembled with pain, longing, and betrayal. Between them, the chain of fate glowed like a wound torn open to bleed. The confrontation ended in a storm of silence. Darius turned away, his cloak billowing, his voice hollow. "The curse will take everything from you, Elara, just as it did from me." His shadow vanished into the forest, leaving only grief and questions behind. Elara sank to her knees, emerald eyes brimming with tears. Kael knelt beside her, his hand steady on her shoulder. "He cannot have you again," he said fiercely. She shook her head, voice trembling. "It is not his choice, it is fate's." The bond throbbed in her chest, heavier than ever, while the distant thunder of war grew closer with every breath. The cavern glowed with ancient light, runes etched into its walls flickering to life as Elara stepped inside. Her emerald eyes widened at the sight of markings that mirrored the chain burning in her chest. Kael followed close, his storm-gray gaze scanning the glowing stone. "What is this place?" he asked. Arian, staff in hand, entered behind them, his weary voice steady. "This is where the bond was forged." Elara's breath caught as she whispered, "It began here." The cavern pulsed like a heartbeat, shadows whispering secrets long buried. Kael reached for her, but Elara pulled away, fear trembling in her voice. "If it began here, it can end here." Arian placed his hand against the runes, his lined face heavy with sorrow. "The curse was not cast to destroy love," he said, voice low. "It was made to bind love beyond death." Elara's eyes filled with tears, her voice breaking. "Then why does it tear me apart?" Arian turned to her, sadness etched deep in his gaze. "Because only sacrifice can balance it." Kael stepped forward, his jaw tightening. "Then let it take me," he said firmly. Elara gasped, her emerald eyes blazing with defiance. "No, it was never meant for you." The cavern trembled, light surging, as though the truth itself stirred restlessly in the stone. The air thickened with shadows as the villain appeared at the cavern's entrance, his silver hair catching the light, his cold smile curling. "So, you found the truth," he said smoothly. Kael drew his blade, stepping protectively in front of Elara. "Stay away," he growled. The villain's laughter echoed, cruel and sharp. "You cannot break what was bound in blood." Elara's chest seared, the chain flaring violently, pulling her toward him. She staggered, gasping. "What did you do?" His voice was velvet and venom. "I bound you to me first." Her heart froze, horror flashing in her emerald eyes as the weight of betrayal crashed over her. The cavern walls split with violent cracks, dust falling as the bond surged like fire. Elara screamed, emerald eyes glowing as magic tore through her veins. Kael caught her shoulders, his storm-gray gaze frantic. "Fight it!" he shouted. The villain raised his hand, power coiling in a storm of shadows. "She is mine," he declared. Arian stepped forward, staff blazing with ancient light, his voice firm. "You twisted love into chains, but light remembers truth." Sparks collided, shadows clashing with golden fire. Elara's tears streaked down her cheeks as her body shook under the curse, caught between Kael's desperate hold and the villain's ruthless pull. The clash faded, leaving silence broken only by Elara's ragged breaths. She fell to her knees, the chain dimming within her chest. Kael knelt beside her, his hand steady against her back. "You are not his," he said, fierce and unyielding. Elara's eyes filled with tears, her voice whispering, "But part of me always was." Arian stood behind them, his gaze heavy with grief. "The truth cannot be undone, only faced." The villain's laughter lingered faintly in the cavern, his shadows slipping into the cracks. Elara leaned against Kael, her body trembling as the truth carved itself into her soul, binding them tighter to a fate they could not escape. The battlefield stretched beneath a storm-dark sky, banners torn, smoke rising in the distance. Elara stood at its center, emerald eyes glowing with unsteady magic, the chain in her chest burning like fire. Kael strode to her side, his storm-gray gaze unflinching. "We stand together," he said, steady and sure. She shook her head, voice trembling. "If we fight, one of us will fall." The air quivered as the villain appeared across the field, his silver hair catching the stormlight, shadows writhing around him like serpents. His smile was cruel. "It ends tonight." Elara's breath caught as thunder cracked above, sealing their fate in fire and storm. The ground erupted as the first strike fell, shadows colliding with light in a violent storm of magic. Elara screamed as the chain within her flared, dragging her toward the villain's will. Kael caught her arm, pulling her back with desperate strength. "Fight him!" he shouted. The villain's laughter rolled across the battlefield, cold and merciless. "You cannot resist what binds you." Elara's emerald eyes blazed, her tears falling as she whispered, "I cannot hold it." Kael pulled her close, his voice fierce. "Then let me bear it with you." The chain flickered wildly, torn between love and domination, each heartbeat pushing them closer to ruin. From the chaos stepped Darius, the fallen hero, his scarred face twisted in torment. His 32-year-old frame bore the weight of shadows, clinging to him like chains. "This is not her fight alone," he said, his voice raw. Elara gasped, her emerald eyes softening at the sight of him. "Darius, please." Kael snarled, blade rising. "He betrayed you." Darius's gaze wavered, regret and longing burning through the dark. "I betrayed myself," he whispered. The villain's voice rang out sharp. "You are mine, still." Darius flinched, torn, then stepped forward. Not anymore. The ground cracked beneath his feet, his choice tipping the battlefield into fire and chaos. The battle surged as light and shadow clashed, splitting the sky with fire. Arian raised his staff, ancient runes blazing, his 60-year-old frame steady against the storm. "Stand firm," he cried. Elara fell to her knees, her body racked by the curse's fire. Kael shielded her, sword cutting through waves of dark energy. Darius struck against the villain, their clash shaking the earth. "You will not take her," he roared. The villain sneered, his silver hair whipping in the storm. "She was always mine." Elara screamed as the chain seared her, the bond tearing at her soul, pulling her between the two men who fought for her fate. The storm reached its peak as lightning split the battlefield in blinding light. "Why?" Elara rose, emerald eyes blazing, her cloak whipping violently as magic poured from her. "No more," she shouted, her voice trembling the air itself. Kael stood beside her, his storm-gray eyes fierce, hands steady at her back. Darius faltered, shadows ripping through him, yet he smiled faintly through pain. "Choose," he whispered. The villain's power coiled like a serpent, his laughter echoing. "She cannot escape me." Elara raised her hands, the bond burning brighter than ever. Her tears glowed as she cried, "Then let fate break upon my love." The world shook as destiny cracked open. The battlefield lay in ruins, lightning fading into a restless sky. Elara stood trembling, her emerald eyes glowing with fire as the bond flared brighter than ever. Kael steadied her, his storm-gray eyes fierce with devotion. "You are not alone," he said. Across the field, the villain rose, his silver hair matted by storm and blood, shadows twisting violently. "Your soul is mine," he hissed, his voice sharp as steel. Darius collapsed to his knees nearby, his scarred frame racked with shadows, but his lips curving in defiance. "Choose her heart," he whispered. Elara's tears burned as she realized fate would demand a sacrifice. Elara stepped forward, her cloak whipping as the bond blazed like fire across her chest. "This curse ends with me," she cried, her voice echoing. Kael caught her arm, his storm-gray eyes pleading. "Do not take this alone." She turned, pressing a trembling hand to his cheek, her tears glistening. "If I fall, let my love live through you." The villain sneered, shadows coiling tighter. "There is no escape. She belongs to me." Elara raised her hands, her magic spiraling skyward. The ground trembled, stars burning through the storm above as her choice pulled the world to its final reckoning. The bond erupted, splitting the sky with golden fire. Elara screamed as light surged from her chest, tearing through the battlefield. Kael shielded her, his body shaking with the force. The villain staggered, shadows burning away, his cold eyes wide with fury. "No," he roared. Darius, with his last strength, rose and struck at the villain, forcing him back into the storm's maw. "Her heart is not yours," he spat, before collapsing into the earth. Elara's tears fell like stars as she cried, "Let this bond end." The fire engulfed them all, breaking the chains that bound her, but at a cost yet unseen. Silence fell after the storm, the battlefield scorched and broken. The villain's shadow dissolved into ash, his silver hair vanishing like smoke. Darius lay still, a faint smile frozen on his scarred face. Elara collapsed into Kael's arms, her emerald eyes dim, the bond no longer glowing, but leaving her trembling. "It is done," she whispered. Kael pressed his forehead to hers, his storm-gray gaze wet with tears. "You are still here," he said, voice breaking. Elara smiled faintly, her strength fading. "Only because of you." The stars above burned brighter, as though the heavens mourned and blessed their sacrifice all at once. The dawn broke, soft light spilling across the ruins. Elara stood with Kael at the cliff's edge, her emerald eyes gazing at the rising sun. Her chest bore no glow, the bond now silent, yet its weight lingered in her heart. Kael wrapped an arm around her, his storm-gray gaze steady. "We have paid the price," he said softly. She leaned against him, whispering, "Yet love remains." Behind them, Arian bowed his head, his staff resting heavily at his side, mourning and hope in his weary eyes. The wind carried Darius' memory like a sigh, fading into the horizon. Elara lifted her face to the light, whispering, "Eternal, even in loss."